Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 50K Webinar Blueprint. My name is Rich Willens. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's an awesome program tonight as we have a very special guest on. His name is Sean Donohoe. And Sean has been in the webinar business for many, many years. In fact, he's one of the guys, the go-to guy when it comes to talking about webinars, doing webinars, and most importantly, once or twice we were just discussing, he's made over $50,000 in one night on a webinar. So please welcome to the program my guest tonight, Sean Donohoe. Hi, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing great, Rich. How you doing, sir?
You know, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Tonight, we're going to be talking about webinars, and we're going to be talking about specifically the kind of webinars that you do. And I guess I wanted to ask you, when did you start doing webinars? How long ago? And what made you decide to get into webinars?
Well, it's a pretty simple background story. I mean, we've done a lot of launches. A lot of people know that we don't launch a lot of software. We got our fingers in many, many pies in many different industries outside of just marketing. But marketing is a very, very powerful aspect to what we do. Obviously, it's the fuel. It's the nitrous oxide in everything we do. And a lot of what we have done with launches was great, but we saw an opportunity with webinars to condense a lot of what we do and the knowledge and everything else that we want to share, the message we want to convey. And webinars provided that opportunity to deliver that content. But I'm primarily a stage speaker. I do a lot. I speak all over the world on many, many topics, and I'll do these $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 boot camps and seminars and everything. And there's only so much you can, fit into a 90-minute webinar. So what we discovered very early on in the marketing career that I have was we had a really powerful message that we wanted to share with the world, to share with as many people as possible. And taking a 3-day workshop and trying to deliver that in a 60 or 90-minute webinar just wasn't going to happen. So what we decided to do was take one of these $5,000 presentations and the knowledge that we compressed into that, break it down, record it all, jump in the studio, and literally take what we did in these boot camps and seminars, create a $5,000 product out of that, and then do a introduction, like I would say module 1, for example, and find the best piece of gold knowledge that we could, and we put it in a webinar. Now, I knew nothing about pitching from webinars. Pitching from webinars versus on the stage, two completely different things, completely different environments. So I took this one section of our stage presentation and what we were doing in these boot camps, I just taught this one piece. And at the end of it, we just had a soft pitch that said, hey, we've only got so much time here to cover this topic, and we're really, really limited here. But if you'd like to continue, we've put up this little page, this little link and this little order form if you'd like to get the rest of it. Now, I was planning on packaging this thing up and selling it from the stage anyway. That was my main goal for recording it. But I thought, let's just teach a little bit and see how this works out, because I heard other people doing webinars and doing well with it. Right. I had no idea at this time. But with that first webinar that we did, $75,000.
Wow.
And I kind of just like, okay, great. Here's the thing. I don't have to travel. I don't have to worry about hotels. Don't have to fly in, worry about bad food and everything else, and end up in some sort of pitch fest seminar. I just sat down like this in front of GoToWebinar, delivered an awesome piece of content, sat back, all these sales came flooding in. I emailed the replay, and I'm like, okay, that was easy. Let's do that again and again and again. And it just went on from there. And we refined our process down and everything else until we really kind of nailed down a solid formula for consistent webinar sales. And it's a major part of our income now.
So let me ask you this: how many years ago was it that you did these webinars, and how many have you done since then?
Oh God, hundreds. I would hate to even put a number on it because I really don't know. Hundreds, but I would say I want to say we did our first webinar 2006, and it was a self-hosted, self-created system because like GoToWebinar's been around for a long time. Actually, no, I want to say 2007 because it was when I was still doing a lot of AdWords and everything else. But 2007, I think it was, and we were doing a self-hosted video platform. YouTube wasn't really that big a deal then. I mean, there was really very few systems. In fact, I don't even think it was GoToWebinar. I hate to say, I think it was WebEx that we were using at the time. And there was this is really before a lot of the big systems kind of took over. And there's a few ropey systems, and believe me, it was a cluster. And insert your
word
there.
Favorite expletive, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. You can bleep this out and fill it with your own expletives. But it was a mess. Technically, it was a mess, and there was very few systems out there that could really handle the traffic and everything else. But we saw the potential there, and thankfully, we were using all sorts of different systems. We were doing very basic PowerPoint. It was ugly PowerPoints with a voiceover and everything else, but people loved it, and especially when it came to the replay. I mean, most of the sales came from the replays, and which is just a video on a page and a buy button at the certain time, and boom, just thousands and thousands of dollars rolling in. So we've done hundreds and hundreds of since then. And thankfully, bandwidth has increased. Technology is so much better. There's so many options out there, and hey, you can create extravagant funnels or incredibly simple funnels and deliver that message, get those sales straight away. So, I mean, this is the heyday. This is the perfect time to be focusing on webinars and high ticket sales.
And webinars are very popular now because of the advent of all these webinar platforms, Webinar Jam, Webinar Geo, On24. You mentioned WebEx. I think WebEx was one of the first ones that actually gave the opportunity for people to do webinars and live webinars. Now, when you first started doing this, it was a PowerPoint presentation, was it not?
It was, yes. And it was ugly. I mean, this is before I had any design skills or I had any team really behind me. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I married an award-winning graphics artist, but I mean, it was down to PowerPoint, and I had no idea really what I was doing, but it came down to the message. I mean, now, the presentations we do are a combination of live video, streaming video, webcam. We do all sorts of fancy stuff, but you can do, just with a basic formatted PowerPoint, even now, you can do amazing, amazing things.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you would also do MP4s, or how do you do that on GoToWebinar, or do you use a different platform when you're presenting a webinar with using MP4s?
Well, we got a couple of little tricks. If we're doing a big webinar where we know we're going to be doing that and we're going to be inserting a video, what we'll do is we'll actually this is a trade secret, guys, so don't share this one. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll actually sit down and record the entire webinar before the presentation. Now, here's the cool thing. You can record an entire webinar, you go through your presentation. The cool thing is it gives you an opportunity then to edit all your ums and ahs, restart your presentation. If you screw up or anything like that, it's great. So you can end up with a really nice edited piece. Right. And then if you're doing a live demo, this is a really important thing, a really powerful tip. If you're doing a live demo of software, we're software developers. So, I mean, a major part of our marketing business is software development. I mean, we have teams of programmers all over the world. One thing I can guarantee, and it's happened to me many times, is when you're demoing software live, it's going to mess up. There's going to be a bug, there's going to be internet outage and all that. So we pre-record that section, okay? And then what we can do is we can bring that in to the recording at the right part. And then we end up with an entire MP4 of the entire polished presentation. Right. And then another thing we'll do is we'll actually put a timer on the beginning. And it's a video stream saying starting in 60 seconds or 10 minutes or what have you. Right. And we'll do that so that people are rolling in the door. We have little instructions. Right. Sit down, grab your coffee, go to the restroom, turn off all distractions. and then boom, the presentation starts bang on time. It looks professional, it's polished, and you look like a rock star. You can even have someone do an introduction, transfer of authority, and all the rest of it. But what you're doing is you're playing a video full screen and doing what's called a loop back. Basically, you take a 3.5 mil jack, another trade secret, guys. You plug your output from your speakers into your microphone socket. That way it streams your computer audio through the microphone socket. Press the space bar, and boom, your presentation is there live. And then you have someone in the chat box answering questions. You are golden. Now, that's basically an automated webinar through a live system. However, technology's caught up with us. That's the way we've always done it. Webinar Jam, which is an amazing platform by Mike Filsaime, my buddy over there. He created a system where you can do live, but you can bring in a YouTube video or an MP4 and then play it and then come back to the live part. So there's all sorts of different options, but I just gave you the kind of automated hack for doing a live presentation, and then boom, you're going.
And you can actually do that too. Even if you're doing it live, you just have to have the two computers. And by using that jack, you can go from one computer to another, and the audio would sound just like it's live and not Memorex. That's an absolutely great tip that you offered. Now, we talked about automated webinars. You like to do live webinars. Which is your preference? Do you prefer to do and use GoToWebinar, or do you use Mike Filsaime's Webinar Jam?
We actually use both. I actually use about 3 or 4 different platforms. We're always experimenting. ClickFunnels, for example, Webinar Geo is one we've been looking at using WebRTC technology. Amazing stuff. Zero lag, which is important for some of the stuff we do in the stock trading world. In the marketing world, and like the IM and affiliate marketing, GoToWebinar. Because it's funny that people who are very familiar with marketing don't per se trust Webinar Jam, because they know a lot of it is like live. It's big live. They have their Ever Webinar system, which is the sister of Webinar Jam. And then you can have that webinar going once, twice, 3 times a day, but it's a replay that looks like a live webinar and everything else. Outside of the marketing world, that system is awesome. It does follow-up emails, follow-up SMSs and everything else. ClickFunnels, they're like live evergreen broadcast, same thing. They can do follow-up sequences, follow-ups to whoever doesn't attend, SMS messages and everything else. And that's fantastic for attendance outside of marketing. Inside marketing, GoToWebinar every time. And if you can if you're going to have a large audience, ask in some of the Facebook groups if anyone wants to sell their grandfathered account, because it costs a lot of money per month for one of those big 1,000-unit accounts now. I was very fortunate to get one of them when they were $79 for 1,000, and I ain't letting that puppy go.
I have the same one too, and it was nice because now it's $400 or $500. Are you familiar with OnTV? OnTV is On24. I'm sorry, On24 is a webinar platform that is similar to Webinar Jam, but it doesn't rely on using a Hangout.
That's the weakness of Webinar Jam. I was going to say they rely on Hangouts, which means, and here's the thing. We do a lot in the stock trading world, and we're talking about stuff real time happening right now. If me or one of my coaches are talking about that, we're doing real time stock analysis. We cannot deal with a 1 minute, 20-second latency. If we're doing anything with day trading, we're looking tick per tick on the stock charts. 1 minute 20 could mean the difference between a $10,000 profit and gone. It's useless for that. So On24 is great for that, and I've looked at that platform a lot. Webinar Jam is great, like I say, for I would say doing a live broadcast and then pushing that to evergreen afterwards. Then the lag doesn't matter. But there's nothing worse than saying, okay, do you agree with that statement? Put a 1 in the chat box.
No kidding.
Waiting 1 minute 20 seconds. I've seen it as much as 2 minutes.
Yeah, and you know what? And with GoToWebinar, you can have that immediate interaction with the customers. And speaking of GoToWebinar, how do you feel about working the question box and the chat box? You know, as a presenter, you're concentrating on putting out the materials and make sure that all of your attendees are getting the information that they've signed up for. Do you have any kind of support people that work the question box or the chat box?
Always. It's essential. I always have one of my senior support staff there answering questions, giving people links, clarifying anything I'm saying, because you cannot do that yourself, and you shouldn't. Remember, the questions box is an engagement with your audience. It's where they are. They want to engage with you. They want to ask questions. They want clarification. Right. Those are the prospects that you're looking to engage and convert. So it's essential that you have someone there that can do that. Now, the alternative, should I say, I'm inventing words here. The alternative is to, if you're doing the live, like I said, where you've pre-recorded and everything else, you can then sit in the chat box and engage your audience directly in the background. They can't hear your keyboard, your microphone's off. They're watching the live presentation, but you can be there. Boom. And now the cool thing is, a lot of people get nervous about broadcasting if they know there's 10 people there, 100 people, or 1,000 people.
Right.
So speaking publicly, again, is one of the biggest fears. So pre-recording it allows you to get rid of all that kind of nervousness with the edits, but then you can sit there, and it's fine to chat with all these people with their questions as they come in, because you can ask for that interaction, bring it in, and then play around with it yourself if you don't have someone to sit with you doing it,
right?
Support person or what have you. So that's an option. Another thing is, if you are using Webinar Jam or EverWebinar, is they have a questions box and stuff like that that goes to an email. You can sit there in the presentations, have a support member, hire someone from the Philippines, right, dirt cheap for pennies an hour, that understands what you're doing, can answer most of the common questions if you don't want to. I mean, there's lots and lots of options, but yes, engage with your audience. It's the biggest thing. And I mean, this is where live webinars really come into their own. You can engage with your audience. And I love calling out people, and because I'll have someone flag a question as it goes by. Little red, like in GoToWebinars, a little red flag. That way I know that question's relevant. I can put a little check there and say, okay, we've got a question from X, and boom, 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 answer it, and then my support person, once it's answered, boom, goes green. I know that's good, and I can keep an eye out because I'll have multiple monitors, and then I can see in real time what's going on. They can't see me. I'm not using the webcam. I've got the presentation. I know the presentation code, but I'll have my presentation plus the questions box, and that way it allows me to really talk to my audience, make them part of the presentation, make them part. You're edutaining here.
Yeah, and that's what that's what you should do. Remember, that person who is engaging with you in the question box, they're more likely or not to actually purchase your product. So when you engage with the person in the question box, you have an idea of finding out what is his hot button. And because you have that personal interaction, you have a better opportunity to close them when it comes time as well. What about collecting phone numbers? A lot of people I know say, you know what, if you want to get a hold of me, or if there's something we can't discuss, or there's something on the webinar, go ahead and leave your telephone number, and my staff, and one of my staff or myself will get back to you, because we want to make sure that you get the information you need to make the right decision. Have you ever taken phone numbers in the question box?
We do that. Okay, a couple of things we do there. Talking about phone numbers, because phone numbers is very important. There is nothing more engaging than a personal phone call, okay? We live in this anonymous world of the internet.
Right.
Where we're sat behind our computers and we have this virtual interaction. Put a 1 in the chat box. Yeah, that's as far as that engagement often goes.
Right.
What we will do is, oftentimes, even on registration, we'll ask for a phone number. Now, this is primarily for high ticket sales. I'm talking stuff that's upwards of the $2,000 mark, upwards of $5,000. The reason being is we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to close that sale. So a couple of things that we'll do. First, right up front, we'll ask for a phone number before the registration. We make it optional, but it allows us to get those SMS messages, reminders, get more engagement, remind people that the webinar's coming up, because in email, we get an average of 147 emails a day. Okay, that's the average emails per day for a lot of people. It's easy to get lost in that noise. However, on these, we check 97% of the text messages that come in.
Right.
Every time it goes off, boom, oh yeah, get that phone number. It also allows you, if you're doing high ticket sales, to call them up and say, hey, and you with different integrations with CRMs, you can do, hey, did they attend? Did they not?
Right.
Put them in different sequences. Hey, notice you didn't attend. Was everything cool? Did you miss the replay? Blah, 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 blah. Or you can have, if you have a team like myself, have someone just call them up. Say, hey, we saw that you didn't attend the webinar, or we saw that you attended the webinar, but you didn't buy. Did you have any questions?
Right.
And we'll do soft. I hate the hard pitch, okay, the boiler room stuff. Don't do that. Don't be that person. But if you do a soft pitch for a high ticket product, Russ Ruffino, buddy of mine, he is a master of this, did $2.6 million in sales. And all they do is a soft pitch. They'll do a great value webinar and everything else, drive people through this incredible webinar. And then they'll mention, they won't even tell you to buy, okay? They won't even pitch you, tell you a price or anything. They just say, hey, if you're interested in learning more, call this number, or set up, click here to set up an appointment and speak with one of our people. They don't even talk about that, but then they have people on the phone to answer any questions, go over bits and pieces, what's involved, and they're selling $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 products.
Right.
That's what we do. It's the same process. So yeah, if you've got a question, what we prefer you do is go and set an appointment to speak with one of our people. That way, depending on if it's yourself that's answering them or a support person, you've got a lot more control over your time. If you have you've got 1,000 people on a webinar and 100 people suddenly put in their phone number for you to call them, that's a mess. You're going to end up all over the place. You're never going to have time to do that. However, for the people who are really are interested, it acts as a self-filtering process by them going on a booking system. You can get like Bookly or all sorts of other different systems. And have them set an appointment. And then you can schedule your time. They can see when it's available. And they're expectant of that phone call. They know there's going to be someone there. You have the time organized to speak with them, or your team does. Boom, absolute gold.
And that's a big thing that's going on now is people are taking applications. They're not mentioning the buy button or exactly how much it costs. And they're taking phone numbers as well, because who better to close when you have 1,000 people on a webinar, or 800, or however many it is, but yet that person who does give you that phone number, all they're looking for is validation, and they're asking for the information that you can deliver to them in order for them to make a right decision. And that's the only thing they really want to know, is they need that confirmation that they are making the right decision. And by getting a phone number or taking an application, everybody seems to be doing it now. And I think that's the right way, especially in a high ticket item, the way it's going. I know you agree with that.
Absolutely. And one thing I would say there is, if someone is committing to a call, and if they're wanting more information, they've already self-selected themselves. They want your product.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
What they're looking for, kind of like Rich said, is validation, but they want to talk to someone to make sure that any objections in their head are cancelled so that they can proceed. And this entire application process that Rich was mentioning, which is another alternative way, is a great way because they self-answer and sell themselves.
Correct.
With the application process, one thing I always do, and it's kind of a role reversal, is why should we accept you into our program?
Right.
And what they're going to do there is they're going to answer that one question to convince you why you should let them in.
Right. Right.
And by doing that, they're selling themselves. And if you say, okay, well, we saw this answer, and this is why you want to be in, great. what can we do here to make sure that you proceed? Now they've already self-selected. They don't want to back down from that. It's a great closing technique.
Yes, exactly right. You know, it's everything is overcoming objections, and the reason why that people they don't buy is because you haven't satisfied by giving them the information they need. So that's why you have to address all the objections either before they come up or after they come up. And what better way not only to address the objections to a phone call, but through that application process, they will tell you how you can close them. You know, you can't sell them and not close them. I know a lot of people who do a webinar and they're great at selling, and they give all the information they need and they get people to say yes and they get them to agree, but they don't ask for the sale, or they ask it poorly. So you are absolutely correct, and it's such a good way to not only overcome the objections, but your customer will tell you how to close them, and that's an important tool. You have a bunch of tools that I noticed that on the last webinar that we did, specifically on GoToWebinar. When we were doing our GoToWebinar, you had a separate link. Once they registered, it went right to your link where you did a video, and I think you gave away a PDF. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Okay, we have several different technologies we use. We're always developing new ways. So what we do, we have a product coming up, for example, called LeadsFlow Pro. It's launching on July 19th. Not a pitch, just telling you why. What this system will do is it will allow one-click registrations to GoToWebinar, which you cannot do normally. So rather than like just going to a sign-up page and everything else, it's a pain in the butt. You always have drop-off between, say, an email blast, and then they get to GoToWebinar. Then you've got about, say, if you're lucky, 30 to 40% uptake on that, which means you've lost 60 to 70% of your leads. So what we do is we have a link that goes in your email that instantly registers them, but it also can instantly put them on your autoresponder, instantly send them an SMS, send push notices, all sorts of really cool technology that we do. So what happens then is this one link stays throughout the campaign. Now, this is a very powerful thing that we've recently added to this. So with a lead flow where you have this one-click registration, when it comes time, and we might also deliver a lead magnet. We'll say, hey, when you sign up, you'll also get this free guide or this primer piece that lays the foundation for the webinar. And that's very, very powerful indeed, because it sets the tone for the value they're going to get. They know the topic you're going to talk about. You've created this teaser or pre-sell for the content itself, framing the value. And when you deliver on that value, you create massive reciprocity. So this one link does all of that. Signs them up, gets them on sends them an SMS, gets them on your autoresponder, which you can't do with GoToWebinar.
Right.
Going direct there, you don't have any chance unless you're doing all sorts of kind of MacGyvered systems. And then we deliver that lead magnet. We've got all these other integrations. Now, on the day of the webinar, what we do is we then send them right to the GoToWebinar link. Everything else is, gone, and everything else, we want them right there at the time of the webinar. Then as soon as the webinar is over, we change the redirect in this lead flow to a replay coming soon. And again, we'll include the link to the download of the free guide, so that anyone who's following any of your older emails, maybe they've gone one that was 3 days ago, they're still clicking on that link. They're not just logged into a webinar over page from GoToWebinar or any of these default pages. That would be a lost, bounced lead, which could be a sale. But if they know, hey, replay coming soon, here's some value, or okay, boom, done deal. And then you put the replay up, okay, good. You change the link in your lead flow. And then what happens is anyone who's clicking in current broadcasts for your replay, old emails for, hey, coming soon, or your broadcast is about to start, or hey, this is happening tonight, and everything else, any of the old emails in the sequence or any of the promo, which we found can give you up to a 15 to 16% extra set of leads and clicks, not to be ignored when you're converting $1,000, $2,000 product. They continue through the flow, and it's all the same link throughout your campaign.
Now,
boom, amazing results.
Yeah. Will this link work on doing Facebook ads? So if somebody clicks on a Facebook ad, boom, it just goes.
Absolutely. Here's the cool thing. Okay, say we use Aweber as an example.
Okay.
This link would be, say, yoursite.com/Rich, and then it's got email equals X, first name equals X, last name equals X. GoToWebinar, for example, requires 3 parameters, those 3. If, for example, one of those links doesn't exist, like the email,
right,
or the first name, or you haven't collected those pieces of information, you can default back to a registration page. In other words, some of those parameters don't exist to auto-register them. We still have a fallback sign-up page. That would work as well with Facebook. So Facebook ad, banner ad, video ad, or what have you, sign up. Well, you're not going to have the email. You're not going to have the first name or last name, but you can push them through to the flow, so to speak, and it still ends up on a sign-up page. So it works regardless. However, with Leads Flow Pro, we also have the support for Facebook lead ads, which you can create a lead ad, which does have their name, email, and everything else pre-filled. They click a button, and boom, one-click auto registration from Facebook lead ads. So there's lots of different ways you can use this technology to do that and have a lot of fun and streamline your webinar process. Now, again, I'm not saying this to pitch Leads Flow Pro. What I'm saying is we've run our business on this for the last year. We built it for ourselves for the single purpose of maximizing our webinars, as well as every other aspect of our business and affiliate promotions and marketing campaigns. And that's what we built it for, to streamline and optimize our webinar process specifically.
Now, is this a plugin?
Yeah, it's a WordPress plugin. It's a very powerful piece of kit. It's not just a webinar system. It's basically, we call it the Lord of the Rings. It's one system to rule them all. It integrates with everything you do, all sorts of different SaaS platforms, autoresponders, webinar systems, membership systems, CRMs. Basically, you get one lead and you can trigger a whole series of events, track what your leads are doing, see what they're interested in, build real intelligence about your audience, see who's buying what. It's literally an all-in-one system for marketing automation. And it's a very cool piece of kit, but we built it primarily for ourselves. We've been using it the last year in most of our businesses now. And yeah, it's just, it's been brilliant for us using this and integrating with specifically Webinar Jam, GoToWebinar. We also support Webinar Ignition from Mark Thompson, adding support for Webinar Geo and lots of other platforms as well.
Very good. Let's talk about webinars for a second. I know you host your own webinars, but what about affiliate marketing? Do you host other people's webinars and mail to your list? And how well have you done with other people's webinars for your list?
Very, very well. Now, to me, it's a great partnership because all you do is, I did one recently. It was a webinar. Okay, funny story. Okay, and I won't mention names. Did a webinar recently with a guy who was in Bali. There was 2 presenters, one in Bali, which is in Indonesia, one in Hawaii. Very disparate time zones. Now, the guy in Bali couldn't get on GoToWebinar, bad connection, what have you. So he was doing it on his phone speaking, but he couldn't bring up the webinar presentation. Okay, so he emailed the presentation literally before we went live to the guy in Hawaii who was actually broadcasting it. So we got one guy speaking in Bali just on his phone, presenting, couldn't see the presentation, but he knows it so well in his head. That the other guy is showing the actual screen.
Right.
They're going through it. The webinar went on for 3.5 hours.
Wow.
It was amazing content and everything else. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a complete mess. This is not going to do anything, but I'm here. I've got to do it. You've got to get to the end of the show. And at the end of it, I'm like passing out. It's like, okay, this is an endurance marathon. And it was still one of the best damn webinars I have ever done in terms of conversions. I mean, it was amazing conversions. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make a single sale. Everyone's kind of laying face down on their keyboards. It's done.
Right.
But conversions kept coming in. Replays were amazing. So yes, I mean, doing other people's webinars, sometimes you scratch your head at some of the webinars and the webinars that are out there. But if they've got good dynamics, they've got a good personality, if they've got a good product, which is obviously important, and they've got a set of stats that can back up their claims, then yeah, it's a no-brainer, because all you're doing is mailing out a few swipes here and there, getting people signed up, getting them on a webinar, boom, done deal. An hour later, you've just made $100,000. Someone else is doing all the hard work, the delivery of products. Right. You walk away with a smile on your face from ear to ear and waiting for the cash to come in. It's great.
Exactly. You know, let's talk about structure on a webinar for a little bit. How long do you think a webinar should last before you actually go into the pitch? They say that most people's attention span is 51 minutes. So you go into a webinar. I know you were talking about some people have a 3-hour webinar. What is a good time? What do you suggest is the right amount of time when you should go into your sales page and your sales pitch?
You know, that's a good question. It depends on the industry. You got to get a sense of your audience. Every audience is different. If you've got I would say new marketer audience, less experienced, their attention span is much shorter. If you have a high dollar audience, for example, what we do in the stock market world, we've got people that have a lot more disposable income. They got a lot more focus on value, content, and results. They're gonna have a higher tolerance for length. Me personally, I always think a lot of people have said 60 minutes and then get to your pitch. Okay, I hate that. The reason being is I want to connect with the audience on 3 levels. I want them to be engaged. I want them to be entertained, enthralled, and even if they don't buy, I want them to walk away feeling, damn, that was awesome. And the thing is, a lot of strategies, you can barely scratch the surface. If you're giving really good value content, I think it takes a little longer. I usually like to try and keep my entire webinar to about 90 minutes. So just after the hour, usually I like about a 15, 20-minute close. Gotcha. But, you know, it depends on the audience. If I'm like talking with someone who's got a lot of, who's very engaged as the co-host, so to speak, or the host of the webinar, there's going to be back and forth and banter and more conversation, which is more entertaining. It keeps your audience more engaged. They feel more charged. So I think that can really have a big difference. Yeah, I mean, I've had webinars that go for 2 hours. So if I'm doing it from about an hour 15 to about the 90-minute mark and then get to the pitch, that's fine. It can go on. You're going to know from your audience what their level is. You'll see it by the questions, the comments, the engagement factors. If it's starting to drop off, then you know your presentation's too long. I am known for longer webinars, about 1 hour or 30 minutes to 2 hours. But I always like to give so much more and, make sure that even if you're only going to close 10 to 15, maybe 20% if you're really good. Right. Still 80% of people who are there, who have invested their time in you, what you have to share. And if you're not delivering really great content or strategies that your customers can use or the host's customers can use, then you're doing them a disservice. And I think that's, if you want to bond and brand yourself as well, give value, massive value, over-deliver value, stand out from the crowd, go way above and beyond what other people do, because a lot of people are there for, 3 steps, buy my product. Right. And it's, minimal content, and you feel like you've just been violated.
Exactly.
Don't be that person. Over deliver, give away your gold information, make people go, damn, get them glued to the screen with the value you give and the presentation, and you'll have sales no matter what you're offering.
You know, I agree with that. And I was a strong believer is if you're going to go ahead and make a presentation, you're not going to be able to give all of the product and all of the information that you normally would give when you deliver your product. But if you do take those 3 15-minute segments and let's say 45 minutes and you deliver your best stuff, people will realize that you have just given them a value. You mentioned the term over deliver. I like that term, but I like to say that people who go beyond expectations and who justify not only the products and the information that they deliver, but you're absolutely right. They close more sales, and 10, 15, 20%, that's an awesome sales closing ratio when it comes to penciling out the numbers. I mean, if you take 100 people and you can sell 10, you know that if your price point's $9.95 and you're selling 10 and 100 people show up, that's $10,000. And of course, scaling it up, if you bring 1,000 people in, that's $100,000. So I see exactly where it is that you're coming from. Let's talk about a minute with you have a beginning. Usually it's an intro, and whether you're working with a host or not, and then you go into what I call the hero story. You know, the rags to riches, the guy who went from delivering newspapers to being the webinar king. How long do you think a hero story should go? And do you really think that if they go on for 5 or 10 minutes, it helps or it hurts the presentation?
I skip it. I skip it altogether. Cut it out of my presentation.
Yep.
Here's the thing. No one gives a rat's ass about you, who you are, your background story, or anything like that. Okay. If you're going to do a brief introduction about yourself, give a little bit of authority, background, or why they should listen to you. I stole this from Colin Thoreau. Okay, so full credit here. 4 questions you should ask or answer for your customer.
Right.
Why you? Sorry. Why me? Why you? Why this? Why now? The why me is, why should I care about what you have to say? Why should I waste my time or invest my time in what you have to say? Why is it relevant to me? What am I going to get? We are all very self-centered creatures, and again, in the marketing world especially, people are very jaded about webinars. You'll see the attendance numbers drop off. You'll see the engagement drop off. You start seeing very aggressive questions. What's this all about? What's the price? What's the pitch? And everything else. And people are kind of getting very skeptical and hostile. So here's what I say, and this is the way I like to approach a lot of my webinars. I'll tell them what they're going to get, who it's for, why they should stay tuned in all the way through, and what they're going to get at the end. Okay? That addresses the why me. Then the why you should be very, very brief. Lay your authority down, what you've done. You've had a transfer of authority from hopefully the host, or if you're doing it yourself.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So if you've got a transfer of authority, they should have already had a bio in the introduction that's just brought them to you, and that should be enough. And you wanted to get right into the content, the value, and everything else as soon as possible. No one cares about the one-legged golfer in terms of webinars. Okay, stories are useful anecdotally for the content and the point you're making. The one-legged, if you're a one-legged golfer with a perfect swing, no one wants to know how, all that. They don't really care.
Right.
They want to know what is in it for them. Very not altruistic, very self-centered, but it's the way the world is. You've got to address those skeptical buttons right off the bat to get them to say, basically break out of the noise. If everyone's doing X, do Y. Stand out, because there's a lot of noise that we're filtered with. Everyone's Snapchatting with 6 seconds of pocket lint attention span. Again, your audience is going to be the same. Break the cycle, pattern break all the way through, shock them with the value you're going to give them. Spend about 5 minutes telling them what they're going to get. Then get right to the point. Get right to the value of the content, and you're going to have that attention all the way through. If you've got a story that's relative to your content, boom, deliver that. That's fine. I mean, in one of my webinars, I talk about when I was working in New York, and I talk about a deli and a pizza joint that was around the corner. The deli closed just after like peak lunchtime. So there was a deli around the corner that got my attention, and I have a big story about that because it's relative to the point I'm making about the right message to the right person at the right time. So dropping anecdotal stories in, perfect. But your entire life story, no one gives a rat's ass.
I agree with you. And, I remember one time somebody emailed me and said they attended a webinar and the first 23 minutes was all about them. And then they did about 10 minutes worth of content. And it was just a total waste of time. And they just get very discouraged about that. So I do agree with you about that. So when you're doing a webinar and you want to start closing, and usually I suggest to people that they should start closing just from the minute you say hello. Getting people to say yes throughout this entire webinar, which includes asking open-ended questions and questions that that are going to be objections and overcoming them. Do you have questions prepared, knowing that the people who are on your webinar are going to ask these questions? And then do you overcome the objections and get people to say yes throughout your entire webinar?
Absolutely. And one of the things that we did in the webinar that we did recently, you and I, one thing I like to do is, very common in this industry, they say, oh, put 1 for yes, 2 for no. One thing I like to do is get them not to skip that. I say type in yes, if that makes sense. The reason being is I want them to actually type the words yes.
Yes.
Very powerful psychology and sales psychology technique that we do very much in our high ticket webinars, because the more they're saying yes to pre-framed questions and statements that they're going to agree with, you've got them, you're creating a symbiosis between you, your message, and where their mind is. And if you understand your audience, their common pain points, the ways they're thinking, the objections they're going to have, oh, is this going to be too expensive? Oh, is this really going to help me? Is this the same as every other system I've seen in this industry?
Right.
If you're answering this, first you want to separate yourself from everyone else. You don't want to be a salesman, you want to be a guide. And if you're guiding people rather than selling them, they're going to be right there with you all the way. And keep pre-framing your close, pre-framing your conclusions with statements and questions that they're going to agree with. Then again, you've got them on the yes path. So all the way to the end, when you're starting saying, okay, and this is very important when you're going from your content to your pitch, starting your transition, you're seeding your end always in mind. I always start my webinar saying that, hey, we're going to deliver awesome value. At the end, I'm going to show you how we can continue this training and everything we're talking about, because we've only got limited time here today. What you're doing by doing that right up front is saying, we're going to deliver some great value, but it's not going to be enough time here. I'd like to continue. So you've already got them agreeing to that and saying, hey, is it okay if I show you how we can continue this at the end? Yes.
Yes, and a byproduct of having them type into yes is that you're telling them what to do. And when it comes time for you to close the sale, what you say is, okay, now go ahead and type in yes on the buy button and go ahead and take advantage of this wonderful offer. So that's where the psychology comes in. It's all about the psychology and getting people to say yes and telling them what to do, because that's all they want. They want an authority figure to tell them what to do. And if you combine that with the information that they need to satisfy their pain point, to give them a reason to purchase, that it's going to solve a problem for them and that they're going to benefit from it. What Colin Terrio said was absolutely correct. It's who, what, when, where, and why, and why am I here, and is this going to benefit me? So I totally agree with all the concepts that you talk about. I want to talk a minute about follow-up. What do you do about replays, and what do you do about encore performances? Is it effective for you, whether you mail your own list or you mail somebody else's webinar that you hosted? Is it effective for you to do a replay?
Yes, absolutely. Now, encore performances are not as effective as they used to be. What we used to do was, we'll do a webinar, and then 2 days later, we have, oh, did you miss this one? And then we'll have an encore, which is basically a replay.
Right.
broadcast like live through GoToWebinar or what have you at a slightly different time zone. That way you're catching different people at different times. And that's become less and less effective. So what we'll do is simple webinar and then a 3-day replay sequence. And what we're doing is we might have day 1, standard replay. Day 2, we might introduce a payment plan, payment option. One thing that's working very well right now is PayPal credit. PayPal, the what do you call it? Payment, interest repayments.
Right, exactly. I think it's 6 months interest free.
Yeah, I had to think what it was called there. But yeah, so if you are doing something like PayPal as an option, you can pitch that as the payment plan. You get the money immediately.
Correct.
Full amount. You're not waiting on rebills and expecting them to drop off and cancel or something like that, but they've still got your awesome training or whatever you're doing. But if you offer 6 months interest-free credit and say, hey, you might have this option in your country, yada, 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 obviously make sure that you have that option with your payment processor. If you're using, I think JVZoo, if you're going through checkout, you can still get that option and stuff like that, as an example. ClickBank definitely does with their integration with PayPal. So a lot of different options there. But so day 1 is straight replay. Day 2, offer a payment option or something extra, maybe a scarcity extra bonus that everyone gets who buys right now. And then day 3 is the closing email sequence. We'll send out 3 emails, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 1 in the evening, with a timer, email timer or something like that. We use Mail Timer Pro, which is available for free. It's one of our free products. And then again, timer, timer on the replay page. This is coming down. And then do yourselves a favor, guys. If you're saying you're closing at midnight, close it at midnight.
Exactly.
So many people will say, oh, well, I might catch those 1 or 2 extra sales. Yeah. Yes, but you're showing your audience you're lying.
Yes.
And you don't want to do that. Genuine. So closing it down at midnight trains your audience. So if you say it's closing, it's closing. It's done.
Right. And you know what? You also have to start your webinar on time. How many times have you been on a webinar where people, let's say the time is 8 o'clock, and then the host will say, you know what? We don't really have enough people in here. We're going to wait another 10 minutes till we get a bunch of other people. That's absolutely wrong. If you're going to say it's an 8 o'clock webinar, you must start on time always. Otherwise, what about the people that are already there? I think it disrespects them and it puts a sour taste in their mouth. Very disrespectful indeed. And yeah, I've even had it where got to be careful what I say, but I've had people who turn up who have a really great presentation. Everything's cool. Everything looks like it's going to be great. And then they bail on the presentation. Oh, you've not got enough people there. Look, attendance records are through the floor. You've got to be innovative. You've got to do all sorts of things to get a higher and higher audience for attendees. But listen, at the end of the day, most of the money now is in the replays. Right. Okay. Right. And you know what else? When people show up, and if there's only 20 or 30 people, and I hear this a lot, well, I'm not going to do the webinar because there's only so many people. Those 20 people were interested enough in that promotion, that email, however they got onto that webinar, to come and see you. There's 20 prospects that you have that you might as well deliver. I always believe if you have 1 prospect or if you have 100, if you have 100 or if you have 1,000, always deliver your best, because those are your customers. They might not buy today, but if they know that you've delivered your best material and your content, they'll eventually buy down the road. Do you not agree? I agree with that 100%. And the flip side of this is, if you are hosting someone else's webinar, be upfront with the presenter of how many people that you can bring to a webinar. Right. If you can only bring 50 people to a webinar, say that. Here's the thing, and frame, hey, I only get about 50 people on the webinar, but we'll mail the replay, we'll focus on that, we'll make sure it's all cool. And, that way you've got a true relationship. Now, if you've got someone who says, well, if you're only bring 50 people, I'm not doing it. Well, guess what? Move on, find someone else. Plenty of other people that you can do business with that have integrity and won't mess up your business, because there's nothing that makes you look bad as the
host of someone else's webinar than having your audience turn up and the person's not there. Now, the other thing is check your time zones, because I've screwed this up before, because I moved from California to Texas, when I said one time zone, like PST, which is where I used to be, and I made EST. So I've had it once when I had a webinar that started 3 hours early, and I had people there, and the webinar presenter's like, I'm not going to be there for another 3 hours. And you're going, what?
Yeah.
So I've actually filled full of content for 3 hours before the webinar started. That's my fault. I'm the only person I've ever heard that's done that. So yeah, make sure you read time zones as well.
Yeah, I did that once when we had webinar swaps. I started it an hour early, and the presenter wasn't supposed to be there for another hour. So, I ad-libbed. Which, by the way, a funny story that you and I had. I like doing a pre-show, and when I was doing well, I still am working for JV Zoo and doing the JV Zoo webinars. I usually do a pre-show, because what that does, it gets me to interact with the audience. It gets them warmed up. Joel Comm likes to come on 5 minutes before and go, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? And all that. Whereas I try to deliver, with the people that are coming onto the webinar, to build that trust, because I believe as the host, I have an opportunity to close my list as well, because who would be better to help close is the person who's the host, and it's his list that he mailed. So I believe that when you do a pre-show, you get people all warmed up, you get them ready to go, you build that rapport, and when it comes time to close, they're going to listen to you because they've already had that rapport. Now, with that being said, I've always started 15 minutes, 20 minutes early, but when it comes time to start the webinar, and if it's at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, we always start on time.
Absolutely.
And I believe, by having that pre-show, like I said, it just builds the rapport with your customers. Sean, it's an excellent interview that we had. Let me ask you one thing before we just kind of wrap this up. What is one tip or one secret or something that you could suggest to the people who are either reading this or watching this, something that has helped you make more money with webinars?
That's a good question. Know your numbers. It's the most important thing you can do with your webinar.
Are you talking about closing numbers and ratios?
I'm talking about all the numbers involved in the entire equation.
Okay.
Know your conversions, your average conversion on a webinar. Now, if you're doing affiliate webinars, if you know that you get 100 people, you close on average about 10%. You know that if they've got 1,000 registrations, about 30% of people may turn up. That's the kind of rule of thumb. Okay, so if you get 1,000 registrants, about 300 people are going to turn up, depending on the engagement, the list, and everything else.
Right.
If you're closing 10% of sales on average, you can start to kind of factor in
30 sales.
You get 30 sales, which means you know your numbers. Now, if you're doing paid promotions, what's your cost per acquisition of a lead? If you're doing, say, $4 per registrant, you know that if your numbers hold true, and you'll know this as you go forward, if you're doing $4 per registrant, and at the end and your product's worth $1,000, okay? So if you know that for $4,000, you've got 1,000 registrants, if 30% of people turn up, you know that, okay, so 1,000 registrants, 300 people turn up, 30 sales at 1,000.
30,000. Right, $30,000.
Let's keep it simple numbers. And if you've invested $4,000 and you've got $30,000, guess what? You're
$26,000. Right.
Great. For another example is if you're doing a $5,000 product, doing a high ticket thing, you know that it's going to cost you about $1,000 a sale. Now, we're talking really high ticket stuff here, obviously, $5,000, $10,000 stuff. But if you know you can spend $1,000 to acquire a sale, most people think $1,000 for a conversion? Oh my God, I'll never do that. Scale it back. If it's costing you $100 to make a $500 sale, or $10 to make a $50 sale,
right,
write a bloody blank check But you'll never know that if you don't know your numbers.
You're
If
exactly
you're
right.
not sure about your conversion statistics, you're not sure about your engagement, how your offer's converting, if you're not split testing your registration page, split testing your ads. But I mean, there's lots of different ways. I mean, we're focusing a lot more these days, obviously for paid traffic, as you could probably tell by what I'm talking about. That's huge for us. Facebook traffic, all sorts of YouTube ads, you know, AdWords, all the different networks. We're focusing primarily on Facebook, but if you know your numbers, it gives you an opportunity to do so much more. There's no such thing as a traffic problem. There's no such thing as a lack of people to view your content.
Right.
It's all in the conversions, and you just got to make it happen. So know your numbers.
And that's what I was going to ask you. How effective are Facebook ads and or Google AdWords or doing YouTube traffic? You talked about $4, to get somebody in. You're absolutely right. It is all based on the numbers. But tell me, how does Facebook ads work for you, and how much do you spend? Let's say on your $497 webinar, how much would you spend on Facebook ads?
You know what? Rather than talk about that campaign, let me tell you one we're running right now. We're running a very powerful campaign with a $20,000 ad spend. ROI on that is insane. It's very difficult to say because I don't want to give away too many of my internal secrets, so to speak.
Yeah.
But let's just say, scale up slowly.
Okay.
We will blow a lot of money. And here's the thing: a lot of people say, "Oh well, put them on a link magnet and then offer them a webinar." Forget that. Go straight for the registration for the training. Tell them what they're going to get in the ads, the benefit, the main why me. Get them on that registration, reinforce that benefit and what they're going to get, the results and everything else. Get that registration, follow up with the reminders, follow up with the replays and everything else. Maximize your conversions there, make sure you know everything that's going on. And it doesn't matter how much your cost per acquisition is, as long as you are making more money than you're outlaying.
Yep.
That's exactly, and I mean, we'll spend, the thing is, we run different campaigns for different things all the time. We're always experimenting. Last couple of weeks, Facebook has been making some big changes, which has pushed our cost per acquisition up to $10. But if we're making double our money back, okay, fine. We just keep refining, keep changing.
Right.
With Facebook, we're more focused on the $1,000 plus. So we change our offers around. We add more here, change a few things until we're happy with it, because we've got to make sure that we're getting more out than we're putting, in. So one thing, and this is another great tip as well, have an upsell with your webinar. How many webinars have you gone to and it's one product? And it's like the big no-no, for webinars is, hey, don't do a upsell. Why not?
Yeah, sure.
Why not? If you can get another 30%, or even if it's another 15% on a higher ticket upsell or a cross sell or something like that, it's a no-brainer. It's extra money for you, your business, and you're doing your customers. If you're giving them more value and opportunity to invest more because they really, really are committed to you, what you have to offer, that's more money for you. It's more benefit for them. Why the heck not? And you can add a massive amount of extra profit from that, which will more than cover any ad spend. Even if you break even on your webinar,
right?
And just as a kind of scale thing, that extra 15%, boom, it's gravy.
I agree with that. And sometimes I've seen where people offer an alternative of choice. And when I say that, when people go in and they give their pitch for the webinar, they usually give one price. And sometimes they'll split up the payments. But if you've got, like you said, an upsell, you can give them what I call is the alternative of choice, where you have 3 buy buttons offering 3 different products. And instead of giving them the opportunity to say no, you give them the opportunity to pick one. And no matter what it is, you at least get a sale. And I believe that it does increase your conversions. Do you agree?
We've tried that, and we found that it to be the opposite, because if you give too many options, you end up with a confused audience, because they're like, okay, so what was it from this one? Okay, well, you got this, you got this, and it kind of creates confusion.
Okay.
For us, and this is purely our data and everything else, we found that giving them one option to proceed has been best because it focuses on, okay, this is what he says we're going to get. We don't have to think about it. We're already programmed psychologically. This is the power of the pitch has got us to this point. We have that one decision to make, yes or no, and if no, why not? Adding two options like a payment plan, we find that as soon as we offer a payment plan, everyone goes for the payment plan.
Right.
We would like that large chunk up front. And a lot of people have done, well, this is the pro plan, this is the gold plan, this is the basic plan. And depending on your product, obviously, and your pitch, you can get most people on the top level. And providing those other options is great to downsell themselves. Mm-hmm. But with webinars, we found that people are so engaged, and then too many options is like slamming on the brakes.
Gotcha.
You know, you're in a Ferrari, you've got the pitch, you've got the pace through the all the value of the content, through the transition, through your close, your multiple closes. And that's like they're shifting gears. They're in the Ferrari going down the highway, 180 miles an hour, and then there's three choices. It's like three forks in the road. And you're like, oh, crap. You know, so just for us, we like to take off the exits, keep them on the straight, and boom, all the way to the finish line.
That's awesome, Sean. Hey, thank you so much for sitting in with us tonight on I know your time, you're a very busy guy, and I do appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. The tips that you've given, you've delivered beyond expectations, and I just wanted to say thanks once again very much. My pleasure. My pleasure. Glad we could have a chat. All right. Thank you, Sean. And thank you, everybody, for who's taken the opportunity, the time to sit through another one of Rich Willens' 50K webinar blueprint. Your time is very important to us, and we appreciate you. So thank you very much. And until the next time, my name is Rich Willens, and we'll see you on another edition of 50K webinar blueprint. So long, everybody. Take care. So long.